There is a kitchen table somewhere. A Sunday morning. 2 cups of coffee, one on each side. A son who has been carrying a question for 30 years finally decides to ask it. Dad, what happened over there? The father picks up his cup, looks at it for a moment, sets it back down without drinking. The answer doesn't come. Not then, not later that day. The son goes home at night with the same question he brought. That silence has a shape. Anyone who grew up in a veteran's home has seen it. Most of them never understood what it was made of. The name is Jack. And what comes next is something that doesn't get explained right, not in the documentaries, not in the parades, and especially not by the veterans themselves. The silence of old soldiers. What it actually is, where it comes from, and why the men who witness the most are almost always the ones who say the least. The first thing to understand is that language was not designed for what combat produces. There is a thing that happens to the human brain in extreme environments. The part of the brain that handles language and the part that processes survival-level fear and violence don't operate on the same circuitry. When something catastrophic happens, really catastrophic, not the dramatic movie version, but the actual thing, the experience doesn't arrive with narration attached. It arrives in images, in sounds that don't stop replaying, in the smell of something specific, in the temperature of the air and the weight of what was in the hands. It lands in the body before it ever reaches words, and it stays there the same way it arrived, without grammar, without sequence, without the connective tissue that makes a story tellable to someone sitting in a living room 30 years later. When a son asks his father what happened over there, he's asking his father to translate a sensory, pre-verbal, stored-in-the-body experience into a string of English sentences that a person who wasn't there can follow comfortably. That's not a refusal, that's closer to an impossibility. The veteran isn't holding back. He's standing at the edge of something that doesn't have a bridge across it, and he knows it, and the son doesn't know why he keeps stopping. Old soldiers know something about their audience that their audience doesn't know about themselves. They know what happens when they do start to talk. The listener leans forward. Eyes go wide. They nod carefully like they're following. They say, "I can't imagine." And they're right, they can't. But they believe they're with the veteran in the moment. They think they're understanding. And the veteran can see, with the clarity of someone who learned to read environments very fast, that they are not. The listener is processing a story. The veteran is partially reliving a fragment of something real. Those are 2 entirely different experiences happening across the same table. The listener feels connected. The veteran feels more alone than he did before he started talking. So he stops, not out of rudeness, out of recognition. Speaking isn't bridging the distance between him and the other person. It's showing both of them how wide the distance actually is. This is why some veterans try once and never try again. Not because they gave up, because the attempt made things worse in a way that's hard to explain and harder to fix. There's another piece that rarely gets named properly. A lot of what old soldiers won't speak about isn't about protecting themselves. It's about protecting the people they came back to. A man who has seen certain things, and war produces things that don't make it into the approved version of events, the version that gets taught and memorialized and honored, doesn't bring those things home to his wife, doesn't put them in front of his children at the dinner table, doesn't walk back into his parents' house with the thing they were afraid of the whole time he was gone. He came back. Part of coming back was a decision he made without telling anyone he'd made it. A wall goes up. On one side, what happened there. On the other side, everyone he loves. He maintains that wall every single day. It costs something. Nobody sees the cost. He doesn't mention it. The wife who spent 3 decades wondering why he never talked about the war probably never knew that every morning he woke up next to her, something in him was doing work, keeping the 2 worlds where they belonged, making sure what lived on one side of that wall never crossed over to the other. It was a specific kind of love, unannounced, invisible. It never asked for recognition. That's not a coincidence. That's the profile. There's a term that researchers and trauma psychologists have spent more time on in recent years: moral injury. It's different from PTSD, though the 2 can live in the same person at the same time, and they often do. Moral injury is what happens when someone does something or witnesses something that violates their own understanding of what's right. Not because they had no choice, sometimes simply because war creates moments where every available option is wrong, where following orders and following your conscience point in opposite directions, where you do what the situation demands and carry what that costs for the rest of your life. Veterans with moral injuries often can't speak about their war because speaking would require them to show a version of themselves they've spent years containing, not a cowardly version, not a villainous version, a human version, one who made decisions under conditions that civilian imagination cannot replicate, and who has to live with those decisions in a world that wants clean stories, heroes or victims, clear lines between the two. Most combat veterans are neither. They're men who were placed in situations where doing right and causing harm sometimes wore the same face. They came home. They don't talk about it because the story doesn't fit any of the containers that are available to put it in. The containers are all wrong shapes. So the story stays where it is. Some of what old soldiers hold isn't about themselves at all. It's about the men who were next to them. There's an understanding inside military culture that runs deeper than any formal rule. What happened in that place among those men belongs to those men, not to history books, not to documentary crews, not to well-meaning family members who want to finally understand. The stories belong to the people who lived them together. An old soldier who has outlived his unit, and many have, that's a quiet number that doesn't get discussed, carries those stories not as memories, but as something closer to relics. Talking about what those men did to someone who wasn't there feels like a violation, like pulling private photographs out of a box and showing them to a stranger. The men he served with are gone, many of them, or scattered, or alive somewhere and carrying the same unspoken agreement to keep what they hold without giving it to the civilian world. The silence isn't abandonment of the story, it's custody of it. He's the one still holding it for all of them. Veterans who don't speak still carry. The body doesn't go quiet just because the words do. There are patterns that show up so consistently they almost constitute a profile. The veteran who does his grocery shopping before 7 in the morning when the store is nearly empty. The one who sits with his back to the wall at restaurants, facing the room, knowing where the exits are before he knows why he checked. The one who registers that something is wrong about a situation before he can name what the something is. The one who wakes at 4 in the morning without an alarm, alert before his eyes are open. This is not dysfunction. This is a nervous system that was calibrated precisely to keep someone alive in a specific kind of environment, and that never fully recalibrated when the environment changed. The body adapted for danger. The body doesn't receive the update that the danger is past. The body is still doing its job. It was built to do this job. It's very good at it. And for many veterans, the relationship to that hypervigilance is complicated in a way that doesn't fit neatly into a clinical chart. Some part of them trusts it. Some part of them doesn't want it to stop, because the version of themselves that operated in that environment was more intensely alive than the version that exists in the quiet of civilian life. More certain, more necessary, more undeniably real. Nobody says that out loud. It's true anyway. Here's something that doesn't come up enough. There are old soldiers who tried to speak, who found the right moment, the right room, the right person, and made the attempt. They put words around some fragment of what happened, and it went wrong. Not because the listener wasn't kind, not because the words were unavailable. Something went wrong because speaking didn't do what they expected it to do. It didn't lighten the weight. It made things louder for a while, more present. A memory that had been managed from a careful distance moved into the room when they spoke about it. Going back to managed distance afterward was harder than it had been before they started. Some of them tried once and went quiet again, and didn't return to it. Some of them are still trying, in rooms where they don't have to explain the language problem from the beginning, with other people who know from the inside what it's like to speak from a place that words were never built to reach. Veterans who find those rooms, informal gatherings, quiet corners of buildings where the people who show up share enough history that context doesn't need to be built from scratch, often describe something that surprises them. They don't describe healing necessarily. They describe not having to start at the beginning. When a veteran sits down with another veteran, they don't have to explain what it looked like, what it smelled like, what a certain sound means in the body at 2 in the morning. The other person already has enough of that terrain mapped. The conversation can enter at a different point. That's not therapy. That's something quieter and harder to find and possibly more necessary. There is a man somewhere tonight, maybe many men, maybe in this audience. He's sitting in a room that's quiet in a specific way. The television is on low. He isn't watching it. He's somewhere else, the way he's always a little somewhere else, even in the middle of conversations, even at holidays, even in the best moments. Part of him is present. Another part is stationed somewhere else permanently, doing something he doesn't talk about. There's someone who loves him, in another room or across the country, who stopped asking, not because they gave up, because they learned over a long time that asking produces something that feels like distance instead of closeness. So the questions stopped. The wondering didn't. He knows this. He knows they wonder. He's thought about telling them, not once but many times, reached toward it in the dark and stopped, not because he doesn't trust them, because some doors, once opened, don't close as neatly as they opened. He's spent a long time keeping those doors where they are. That's a form of labor. Nobody sees it. It doesn't stop. There's nothing wrong with him. He was built by a specific experience for a mission that ended. He's running the same system in a different environment now. The system still works. The environment is just different. The people who want to understand him, really understand him, not collect facts about what happened, probably won't get there through asking. They'll get there through time, through staying, through learning to be in the same room with the silence without needing it to become something else. Because the silence isn't emptiness. It's everything he decided not to say. And everything he decided not to say is most of the story. If this landed somewhere real, leave something in the comments. Veterans, family members, anyone who knows that kitchen table, the one where the question gets asked and the coffee gets picked up and set back down. This channel keeps going because of the people who show up in those comments and say what they've been carrying. That's what this is for.